Hey guys, we're back at it again with some math here. Decided this first week that we would just be doing some review problems on what we were working on before we left for this break. I hope you guys are all doing well. At any point when I'm doing an example, feel free to follow along on the note sheet that I posted on the Google Classroom. You should also practice just pausing the video at certain times and trying the problems on your own and then watching the video to see how it's done. That way you can try it on your own, but then see how it's done eventually once you start playing the video again. So let's start with some GCF factoring. So GCF factoring, remember we have to make our factor trees. So we ask ourselves, how do we multiply to get 25? Well, in this case, 25 multiplies as 5 times 5. Okay, so for this term, we go until we hit prime numbers. So since 5 can only be broken down into 1 and 5, I know that I'm done with that tree. So my two factors are 5 and 5, and then I look at my variables, and I have 4 x's, so I write out 4 x's. Okay, then I move on to my next term. Okay, don't worry about the negative to start off with now. We're only worried about 45. So we ask ourselves, how do we multiply to get 45? Well, it's 9 times 5. Okay, 5 is a prime number, so I can't break it up anymore, but I look at 9. 9 is 3 times 3. So now I take the ends of my trees and I write them out. So I got 5, 3, and 3. Okay, I look up here, I have 3 x's, so I write out 3 x's. Okay, and I move on to the next one. On this one, though, 5 is a prime number already, so we don't have to break up that at all because we have it, and we know we have 1x. Okay, so once I got all my factors written out, now I look at what do they have in common. Well, looking at all the constants, I know that they all have at least a 5 in common. So I can go through and circle that they all have a 5 in common. Okay, this one still has a 5 left, but none of the other terms have a 5. Same with the 3's. We have some 3's here, but none of these have 3's. So we know the GCF, what they have in common, greatest common factor, is they at least have a 5 in common. Okay, then I go through and look at the variables as well. Well, I have an x in common here, I have an x in common here, and I have an x in common here. So they all have at least 1x, so they know they have an x in common. Okay, so now to finish factoring, remember we put the GCF outside the parentheses. Okay, and then we go back through our diagram and we cross off the GCF out of those terms. Okay, and we look at what's left over. Well, here I have a 5 left over, and I have 3 x's, so that's x to the third power. Okay, here I have 2 3's left over, so when we have more than one number, remember we multiply them back together. Okay, so 3 times 3 is 9, and then I have 2 x's, so it's x to the second. Okay, now way back when we talked about this one in class, everything cancels out, so if everything cancels out, we know there's a 1 left over. Okay, we close our parentheses, and then we look up at the start of the problem and carry down whatever sign they were to begin with is the sign that they have to end with, and that's my final answer. Okay, so now would be a good time to pause the video if you want to try the second one on your own in a notebook, okay, and then you can replay the video, but I'm going to go ahead and move on now. So let's look at the second one. Okay, so 48, okay, we can break this down several different ways. I'm going to break it down as 6 times 8. We break down 2 is 6 is 2 and 3, 8 is 4 and 2, and then we have 2 and 2. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3 2's and a 3. So 3. Okay, I look at the variable, I have 2n, so it's n. Okay, let's break down 60 is 6 and 10, 3 and 2, 5 and 2. Okay, so I have 5, 3, and 2 2's, and I only have 1n. Okay, 54, I kind of ran out of some space over here, so I'm just going to write the tree over here. Okay, 54 is 9 and 6. We have 3 and 3, and we have 3 and 2. So I have 3, 3, and 2. Forgot a 3 there. Okay, so now we're here. I don't have any variables, so I have nothing to copy down there. And now I go through and circle what they have in common. Okay, well, they all have at least 1, 2. Okay, we have some more 2's here, some more 2's here, but no 2's here, so we can't circle any more 2's. But they do all have at least 1, 3 that I can circle. Okay, so now we've circled all the numbers they have in common. So their GCF, what they have in common, is they all have a 3 and they all have a 2. So remember, once again, if we have more than one number, we multiply. So the GCF is 6. Okay, Looking at the variables, this doesn't have any variables at all, so they don't have any variables in common, which means we found our final GCF of just 6. So that's what's going to go outside our parentheses. Okay, and then we cross off to take that away to see what's left over. Okay, so I have a 2, a 2, and a 2. So remember, we multiply those. Okay, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. Feel free to use a calculator through this process. N and n, so 2 n's is n to the second. Cross that off. Okay, 5 times 2, we multiply those together. 5 times 2 is 10. We have an n left over. Okay, cross this off. Multiply those together. We have 3 times 3 left over, which is 9. And then we carry down the original signs, plus and minus, and we have our answer. Okay, so that's called GCF factoring, greatest common factor. Okay, on the Friday before we left for break, we learned what's called quadratic factoring. Okay, specifically, remember this is called a trinomial because there's 3 terms to it. Okay, and what we do is we use our diamond puzzles to factor these ones. Okay, diamond puzzles. So remember, our diamond puzzle set up like this. Okay, I draw a diamond. Okay, so what we do is we have 3 numbers here. We have an A value, a B value, and a C value. Okay, the C value is 7, the B value is 8, and there is no A value, which means it's an A value of 1. Okay, so what we do is we want our C value to be up here always, and we want our B value to be down here. Okay, so in this case, our diamond's going to have a 7 on top and an 8 on the bottom. So what we want to do is we want to find 2 factors. Remember, the factors need to multiply, okay, to get C, and they need to add to get B. Okay, so we want these 2 factors, what they need to multiply to get 7, and they need to add to get 8. Well, it's nice because 7 only has 1 factor, or 2 factors technically. It's a prime number, so the only way to multiply to get 7 is 1 times 7. Well, 1 times 7 is 7. 1 plus 7 is 8, so that is our 2 factors. Okay, once we have our 2 factors, we open up 2 parentheses, and we put our 2 factors with our variables. So it's r plus 1 and r plus 7. And just to remind what we talked about on Friday before we left for break is what we're undoing here is we're undoing distributive property here. So if I redistributed this, r times 1, or r times r is r to the second. R times 7 is 7r. 1 times r is 1r. And 1 times 7 is 7. Combine our like terms, we get r squared plus 8r plus 7. Okay, so what we're undoing here is look at if we're starting our problem, r squared 8r 7, is we're undoing this distributive property to start here and figure out the 2 parentheses that multiply to give us that. Okay, so let's look at some more examples. Okay, so here we put our C value up top, make sure we carry any symbols with it, so it's negative, so I need to make sure it's negative. Okay, and then I have a negative 2 on the bottom. Okay, so we need to find 2 numbers that multiply to give you negative 24, but those 2 numbers need to add to give you negative 2. Okay, remember we always focus on the multiplication first. Okay, so I'm going to focus on what multiplies to give me 24. Well, we know we got 1 and 24. Okay, 2 and 12. And I think what I'm going to do is, it helped you a lot. A lot of people was I had those multiplication times tables. I'll post a copy of that on the Google Classroom so you can use that if you get stuck with some of your times tables. Okay, we have 3 and 8, and then we have 6 and 4. Okay, so those are our multiples of 24, factors of 24. Okay, now we need to figure out which ones will add to give us negative 2. Well, since they're multiplying to get a negative, that means one factor needs to be negative. Okay, so we know one of these numbers will be negative and one of them will be positive. Okay, so then what I do is I look at the addition and I say, okay, that's how far apart the 2 numbers need to be. Okay, so if you look down here at the bottom, ask yourself, how far apart is 6 and 4? Well, they're 2 apart. Well, that means 6 and 4 are going to be our answers. We just need to figure out which one's negative. Now, you can do some guess and check in your calculator if you get stuck, but 6 plus -4 is +2, but -6 plus +4 is -2. So those are our two factors. Okay, so then our final answer is going to be n minus 6 in parentheses and n plus 4 in parentheses, and that's your final answer. Okay. Looking at some more examples. Okay, once again. Okay, this time our C value is -40, so I put -40 up top, and I put 3 on the bottom. So let's look at some factors of 40. Well, we got 1 and 40. We got 2 and 20. We got 4 and 10. We got 8 and 5. 6 doesn't go in, 7 doesn't go in. Okay, so there's our factors. Once again, we're multiplying to get a negative, so we know one factor, okay, needs to be negative. Okay, so it's just about playing around with which one needs to be negative. Well, remember, for this rule, we figure out how far apart are they. Well, they need to be 3 apart. Well, which one of these 4 sets is 3 apart from each other? Well, 5 and 8 are 3 apart from each other. So then it's just about figuring out which one's the negative. Okay, in this case, the negative needs to be the 5 to add up to +3. So there's our two factors. So we have n plus 8 and n minus 5 is our final solution. Okay, last one. I'm going to have you practice 2 on your own, and I'll post the solutions to them. Okay, we go here. C value is 35. B value is -12, so I need to carry that down. So how do we multiply to get 35? Well, we always got 1 and 35. 2 doesn't go into it, 3 doesn't. The only other factor is 5 and 7. Okay, well, 5 plus 7 is 12. But I need to get -12 somehow. And we had examples like this in class. Well, there's 2 ways to multiply and get a positive. A positive times a positive is a positive, but also a negative times a negative is also a positive. So I know that my answers need to both be negative in this case. So I get x minus 5 and x minus 7 is my final answer. Okay, so now as we head to the back of the notes, now would be a good time to pause the video. Okay, try the next 2 on your own, see how you do. If you get stuck, then play the video. Okay, these take a lot of practice, and you need to understand that sometimes it comes quick, sometimes it doesn't come quick. Don't be afraid to use your calculator. Don't be afraid to use the times table to help you out. Okay, these take a lot of practice, and usually people don't find mastering these until they reach algebra 2 and they start to become really, really comfortable with them. Okay, so if you want to pause the video now, try the next 2 examples on your own, and then replay it when you're ready to move on. All right, so I'm ready to move on. Okay, we're going to check these 2 answers. Okay, so I put 16 on top, -10 on bottom. So we need factors of 16. We got 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. Okay, and then we need to figure out how do we add to get -10. Well, 1 plus 16 is 17. That doesn't work. 2 plus 8, that's +10. Remember, we just went over this example. Okay, we want -10, so what we do is we make them both negative. Okay, so that means -2 and -8 are our 2 factors. So b minus 2 and b minus 8 is our final solution. Okay, last one. Multiplying -28, add to 3. So let's look for factors of 28. We got 128, we got 2 and 14, and we got 4 and 7 are our factors. Okay, finding those using the calculator, finding those using the times table, whatever helps for you. Okay, now it's multiplying to get me a negative, so I know one factor needs to be negative. Okay, one factor needs to be negative. So we look at the addition as a hint. Okay, 3 apart from each other, 3 away from each other. Which one of these are 3 apart? Well, 4 and 7 are 3 apart. Then it's just about figuring out which one's negative. In this case, the 4 needs to be the negative to add up to positive 3. My apologies. So we have a plus 7, a minus 4. Okay, a plus 7, a minus 4. Okay, so that's a majority of your practice problems you'll do on WAMAP are like these. You do have one challenge problem, so I want to look at an example of this together. Okay, I'm not going to do this one. Okay, I'll just show you an example on number 2. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this number out in front. In this case, our A value is 4. Our B value is negative 32, and our C value is 28. Now, if you look back at all of our examples to A value is 1. That number out in front is 1. That first coefficient is 1. Okay, we talked about this to start the problem. Our first coefficient's 1. Our first coefficient's 1. All of these we have are coefficients of 1 out in front. Okay, meaning our A value is 1. Well, what do we do when our A value is not 1? Well, there's a couple different methods. Okay, later in math, we would have learned a more complex way to factor. Okay, but in this case, if I look at the other terms, they're all divisible by 4. So the easiest thing to try to do is just divide that coefficient away. So divide the 4 away, but if I divide one thing, I have to divide everything. Okay, so what happens is this cancels out because 4 divided by 4 is 1. We're left with n squared. Okay, negative 32 divided by 4 is negative 8. And 28 divided by 4 is 7. Okay, now, this isn't just some magic we're doing here. Actually, what we're doing is we're doing some GCF. We're just doing a quick shortcut of GCF. Okay, so what we did is we found out that GCF 4 goes into each of these terms. So what I need to do is put that GCF outside the parentheses. Okay, now, if you look in the parentheses, we have a problem that's similar to what we had been doing, our diamond problems. Okay, so I keep going, put the C value up top, that negative 8 on the bottom. How do I multiply to get 7? Well, it's just 1 and 7. 1 plus 7 is 8. But I want it to be negative 8. Well, then it needs to be negative 1 and negative 7 to be negative 8. Okay, so negative 1, negative 7. So I have n minus 1, n minus 7. And then I just put that GCF out in front, and that's my final answer. So you do have one homework problem where you have a constant out in front that's not 1. So what you got to do is you got to divide that away, then do your diamond puzzle. Okay. Hopefully this helps you for working on your practice review problems for this week. Please log on to WAMAP and complete all of your problems. If you get stuck, send me an email, okay? Don't start freaking out. This is a very difficult time for a lot of us. If you need help, I'm here to help you. Okay, remember I have office hours in the mornings and office hours in the afternoons where you could one-on-one Zoom in with me if you need to and go through the problems together, okay? But please use those practice problems, use these notes to help you with your practice problems, and let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Okay, good luck, everyone. Look forward to seeing you soon.